November seems in some ways just around the corner, but think about all of the things that are going to happen between then and now and how they could impact this race. So a 2-point edge for Joe Biden in this poll is one, well within any sort of reasonable margin of error, and secondarily is going to change 10 times as we go through and these two actually begin to go head to head, which really fundamentally hasn't happened yet in this race. I mean, since the coronavirus, Joe Biden has been pretty marginalized in terms of his public appearances, and he's certainly done well in terms of fundraising, but has not been able to actually get on the trail and do the other things that he needs to do as a candidate, whereas the president has been in front of the cameras singularly every day. I think what we see, though, is despite the president's overall numbers lagging a little bit with independents on his approval, he's +2 against Joe Biden here among independents. Both have their partisans basically lined up in this poll, at least. The president's +70 among Republicans, Biden's +70 among Democrats, but the president leads Joe Biden by 2 points among independents.
What we've seen since we've started asking the question of who would you vote for in a presidential race between Donald Trump and Joe Biden, what we've seen is that Joe Biden has pretty much been in the lead throughout the entire course of this election season. So even if we go back into 2019, people have been asking this question for a little while. And just in most surveys, again, there's going to be a lot of variation here just because different houses have different effects. In most surveys, what we're seeing is that Joe Biden has been ahead for the course of almost entirely this race. Now, does that mean that Joe Biden is absolutely positively going to win on election day? No. The story there is that there's a lot of different moving pieces to reading those numbers. The first of which is that these are all early election polls, right? So there's a lot that can happen between now and election day. Although there is some evidence that early election polling has been more accurate in the last couple of election cycles. The second piece of this puzzle is that we can start to think about who will actually show up to vote. One of the things you might notice is that these polls are among registered voters, right? So these are people who are registered to vote, but that doesn't mean they're who are actually going to vote, right? Pollsters have this weird job where at some point what we're trying to do is tell a story about a future population that doesn't even exist yet. We're trying to tell a story about a group of people who will eventually show up to vote in November of 2020. Now, that's, as you might imagine, kind of hard to predict. It's hard to know who those people are going to be. And different pollsters have different guesses about who it's going to be. So one of the things that's going to happen as we get closer to the election is we're going to start to transition between these registered voter polls and what are called likely voter polls. And those are going to be these pollsters' guesses, sometimes informed by a lot of different pieces of information, but still guesses, estimates about who is actually going to show up on election day. And those things, again, especially in an election like this, where we have a year with a pandemic, an impeachment, and very likely a recession, it's hard to know exactly what that's going to look like.